Hi guys, it's nice to be back. I took a very long break from making videos. The early ones weren't all exceptional anyway. I'm going to try and put progressively more effort into videos and get better and better as I go along. We're going to talk about the Scythians today, the Scythians or Scythians, depending on how you want to pronounce that. They're a Proto-European slash Aryan kind of root culture, if you like. They go back to by modern historians put their origins about 5000 BC. They stretch from Ireland, or Ireland, or Ayr, which is a very old name for Ireland, to the India and the Indus Valley, of course, and perhaps, possibly as far as Japan with the Ainu. The Hittites, the Sumerians, Minoans, Phoenicians all have kind of common roots with this group of people. There were pastoralists, often followed herds and stuff back and forth. Very good on horses, and they invented the chariot as well. Scots, of course, and the early English, of course, using chariots. We know this from the stories of the Romans and their fighting with Boudicca and so on. They used to use chariots and so on. Um, the Scots, again, it's an intro. There is a quite a cool Greater Scythia comment on the declaration of the Scots going back to 1320, and they arrived into Scotland via the Tyrrhenian Sea. Their appearance, of course, being very similar to modern Scots: blue eyes, sometimes green eyes. They were heavily tattooed, red hair, or very pale complexion, and so on. In Historia, written by the Venerable Bede in 731 AD. There's also a story saying that they hailed from Scythia, and got lots of crazy notes made after. Yeah, they made their way to Ireland, were denied citizenship in Ireland, if you like, if I may. They were told though that they could go to Scotland, and there is another story revolving around the Picts in a certain Egyptian princess as well. Yes, it's quite interesting. Who may well have given her name, and probably did actually give her name to Scotland. You might know who I'm referring to, but that's for another video. The Irish the Irish people's genetic heritage comes from Eastern Europe as well, going back quite a way here, thousands of years, and of course the Middle East. So you can see how successive migrations of people from the Black Sea and so on would have pushed them their way into Ireland. There are other theories here, and I will be commenting on them as we go through some of these videos. They drank and ate dairy products, which probably held them in good stead. This is at odds, of course, with many other peoples across the world who are lactose intolerant. They're obviously tall, sturdy, strong people. Some of the world's strongest men. In fact, the majority of the world's strongest men hail from Europe and Northern Europe. So Germany, obviously, England. We have quite a few world's strongest men. And up there in Scandinavia, Buddhists as well. There's a very interesting, curious Buddhist connection to the Scythians. Early pictures and depictions of the Buddha actually have a predominance of blue eyes in the statues and so on. And the swastika is also a very common motif. And the swastika is a very Indo-European and Scythian symbol. And we're going to find it all over the place, actually, when you go back in time. The Phoenicians, of course, are related to this tribe, and as they are to the Israelites through the tribe of Dan, which is one of the 13 tribes, the Danube, Tuatha De Danann, which were a Druidic order. They're found a lot in Ireland, in Scotland, and Andalusia also have this etymological root. That's for another video though as well. I want to keep these fairly short. The bunch of arrows that it's tied together, and it's morphed into the axe as well, but the arrows tied in a bundle, and the eagle, incidentally, are originally of Scythian origin. And where do you find the eagle and the bunch of arrows? Quite interesting. Quite interesting. That I'm sure you know what I'm talking, where I'm referring to. The Hyksos were considered Scythians, and it is these shepherd kings, obviously, that you find in Israel. But Manetho and Josephus are very, very prominent and important historians. We have a lot of information from Josephus, particularly as well. They talk about the Israelites being of Scythian origin and coming down through the Middle East, the Levant, and so on. Manetho, an Alexandrian Egyptian, writing in the 4th century BC. Josephus, writing in the 1st AD. Very prominent historian. So, the Hyksos brought bronze and the chariot essentially into Egypt as well. And there's this amazing connection with Egypt to the Hyksos, and they were the Israelites, of course. I believe wholeheartedly now that the Israelites were essentially Hyksos in origin, and the Hyksos, of course, being a Scythian kind of branch of the Indo-Europeans. They also sported locks, like side locks on their hair. You see this in Egyptian iconography. So the Scythians had these side locks, and of course Jews to this day wear side locks. What are they called? Peshu? I can't remember. Sorry. Interesting little connections though there. Also, Israel. In northern Israel there is an ancient city called Scythopolis as well. Scythopolis. There's quite a lot of archaeology supporting this history. And the Iranians have a very clear connection with the Scythians. It's quite obvious. Aryan heritage. Iran translating as Aryan Imperium, Iran Shah translating as Aryan Imperium. If you go back, you have to go back quite a way, but you'll find Iranian culture was originally extremely Indo-European. I just wanted to just go back to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is in India, and they talk about the Aryans in this ancient document, a Vedic document of philosophy and so on. And it's a compilation of books. They call it the Elders of the Area, and it says here, this is a glossary in the beginning, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Aryan, a follower of Vedic culture, a person whose goal is spiritual advancement. He truly knows the value of life and has a civilization based on spiritual realization. And here's another quote from the same book. The word Arya refers to those who are advancing spiritually. The Aryan family is distributed all over the world and is known as Indo-Aryan. In prehistoric days, all of the members of the Aryan family followed the Vedic principles, and therefore they became spiritually advanced. The glorification of the Supreme Lord can be very much appreciated by the Aryan family, although there is no bar for others. The members of the Aryan family very quickly catch the essence of spiritual life. So it's very interesting, that, isn't it? They're an extraordinarily spiritual people as well, exporting their mythologies and religions all over the place. So I'm also very quickly here going to read from a book. Okay, I just wanted to finish off by giving a little reading from The Dragon Legacy. It's by a man called Nicholas de Vere. He claims to have heritage from going back far enough, these Scythians and Indo-Europeans, and he gives some extremely important and I think elucidating information on this this tribe of tribes, if you like. So I'm just going to read you. He has a little portion on the Scythians. It shouldn't take too long, but I thought it was extremely important. I've had this book for a very long time. The guy clearly knew something. He claimed to be from an order, a very old order, a secret society, if you like. He's related to, well, his last name is De Vere, and that's an aristocratic line, very closely associated with the kings and queens of England. I love that. I will talk about one or two other De Veres in history in later videos. Phenomenal stuff. So yeah, I'm just going to give a few quotes. They had evolved very early on in human social history and belonged to a Scythian area. They had evolved very early on in human social history and belonged to a Eurasian-wide hereditary priestly community which had originated with the Scythian Aryans. The name Scythian was originally spelt Scythian and 16th century England, and it is from this tribal name that we obtain the word scythe, denoting a curved blade, agricultural tool, same named because its similarity in shape with the Scythian sword. The Scythians were not, however, named after their use of a curved sword. The name Scythian is related to a group of words that appear in Indo-European language, which are found as far apart as air in northern India, indicating that they had a common Aryan origin in Scythia. They included the Scythia, Sidhi, Scyther, and Sidhai. The Cymric dd is pronounced the, while the Irish and Scottish, the th, the, is spelt dialectically dh, the, whilst the s being a word is pronounced sh, as we have related. The Sidder in Danish society were witches who practiced the art of knot tying and loosening. The Siddhas, as well as being seers, could control such powers as to influence the outcome of human affairs. This is that religious connection I was talking about. They were seers, wise men and women. In this respect, their name reflects their ability, which in India were called the Siddhis, a word used to describe the powers of the yogi who had self-realized. The curious Irish word siddhe, pronounced she, or sheath, or sheath-a, attributed to the fairies and meaning powers. He's talking about an old name here, fairy, not relating to fairies, we understand, but peoples, if you like, is therefore identical to Sidher or Shithir and Sidhi or Shithi, and is derived therefore from the people of the powers. The Scythians and Scythians, Shithrians, in Scotland, the royal fairies were called the Síl or Síli, and their princesses were related to the sculpted Sheila Nagig over church doorways, who do not depict ancient goddesses of fertility, but were the royal grail maidens of the elven kings and queens. Now, this is debatable. I thought that was interesting to put in here. Obviously, the doorways of churches and the female motifs and the Virgin Mary is often found above the doorways of churches, modern churches, cathedrals, and so on. I think this is a very interesting connection, and you'll see why in just a second. Many of which were built on sacred sites of ancient sacred groves, indicating that in entering these buildings. One was entering through the vulva of the maiden into the underworld, the realm of Ephraim and the kingdom of heaven. Now, this idea goes back to places like Skara Brae and Dogon tribes in North Africa. They had the layout of their homes in which you walked through the door, which symbolized the vulva. This is you're talking very, very long way back in our history, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, in places like Skara Brae, which is an island up of Scotland. They were permitted over church doorways because the early church itself wanted to identify with the old ways. At least in the beginning, a part of the old ways, and later, which Catholicism took over, the synagogues remained in place in order to attract the convert pagans. Okay. In pre-Christian history, although some practiced agriculture for a while, according to Mari Hall, they abandoned it. This is talking about the Scythians again. They abandoned it for their traditional ways of life, and many of the Scythian clans remained solitary and insular nomadic pastoralists, horse lords who ranged across large tracts of Europe and Asia for centuries. Others opted later for a more settled existence and mixed settled agriculture with pastoralism, a system that can be found in both Takal Makan, where they built fine cities, and in Ireland, where they became known as the Trooping Fairies. In general, they were usually tall, pale-skinned, with golden red hair and green eyes, unlike the Celts, who were stocky and squat with ruddy complexions and dark hair. They practiced settled agriculture from a very early period. So the Celts, most likely hailing from the Bronze Age. What is it? A farmer, Bronze Age farmers, basically. The Aryan royal families didn't marry with other tribes or castes, but despite this, with the development of many of their clans of settled city-states, they became urban, multiracial, and appreciated cultural diversity. The Aryan Hittites, in particular, were close allies of the Jews, whose draconian royal family, the House of David, made the Israelites, in a cultural sense, an early Aryan nation. The Dan tribe of Dan, the Scythians and the Aryan Scythian Gaels had numerous settlements either or in or adjacent to Israel and Judah. So there's a very old connection between England and Judea here, and it's still there if you know anything about current politics. The history of Babylon, England, the new Babylon, the new Israel in England, and so on. There's a somewhat hidden history, a Masonic trope, but it's interesting. Let's read a little more. So the Hur syllable in Huranian has been asserted by scholars including G. Contenu in a French book that I'm not going to try and pronounce, to be Har or Ar, meaning the Hurrians. Like the Scythians, were Aryans with an Aryan Vedic royal sacral family of gods. They bestowed these upon the Hittites, whose culture they dominated. The Hurrians or Aryan Mitanni did in Mesopotamia. The Hittites, in turn, provided the Greeks with these red gold-haired gods, including Zeus or Diaspata, the Jewish Jehovah, whose ancient symbol shared with the sacred dynasty as a whole was, ironically, the swastika. And just one more little bit here. In the annals of Irish history, the Scythians Tuatha De Danu, who had migrated farther still to the islands of the north, were described as a tribe of deific queens, kings, princes, and lords, and were noted for having druids of their own. In Japan's northern islands, there lives a shamanic tribe called the Ainu, whose early writing style has been identified as being Gaelic Ogham. Wow. I'm going to read that again for you. In Japan's northern island, there lived a shamanic tribe called the Ainu, whose early writing style has been identified as being Gaelic Ogham. These Gaels, these Aryans, were an extraordinary root race. We're going to have to do quite a few more videos on this stuff. The Aryan Scythians, horse lords, were a noble tribe, a sept of the Aryan peoples who, during various migrations, had also wandered east several centuries before the Danube displacement. On their reputed first journey to Ayr in 1500 BC, they were described by their contemporaries as being highly feminine and flamboyant. They traveled southeast via Persia, Iran, from 1800 BC onwards, and had entered the Indus Valley and intermingled with the Dravidian population. So this is largely, this is an interesting history. I don't go with every aspect of it. We're going to flesh out a lot more of this history as we go on, and I think I'm going to spend some time talking about the individual these cultures and civilizations that popped up and the things that connect them. Anyway, I'm going to leave this here. I hope you enjoyed that. I don't want this to be a long video, so I'm going to sign off. I hope you enjoyed that. Goodbye.